do it. You'll be a hero. Trust me.
What's the true meaning of fantasy? Often it's synonymous with magic, fairies, and dragons, tales of heroism and drama, vast, elaborate worlds that defy the impossible. Metaphor ReFantazio gives us all of this, but Atlus goes deeper too. What is the real purpose of a fantasy story? Is it a metaphor for our own world? And what if a fantasy story centred on, of all things, a magical election?
By this story of fantasy, may this faded world be painted anew.
Your Highness, this way!
In its 35-year history of developing games, Atlus has become renowned for its Persona and Shin Megami Tensei series. Now it's moved away from teen drama in real-life Japan to offer a sprawling high-fantasy adventure that evolves its formula in what the studio calls a culmination of our RPGs.
My lord, are you hurt?
Really, Metaphor ReFantazio is the culmination of the genre as a whole. It's a quintessential Japanese RPG inspired by the past, but with Atlus's distinct style cementing the developer as the preeminent producer of the genre, alongside Square Enix and its celebrated Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games. The result is an enchanting, thought-provoking fantasy that's epic in every conceivable way, grand in scope and operatic in drama, a poetic, heroic tale, and incredibly long.
Double do. I feel stronger. Nice.
Politics has often featured in Atlus games, but perhaps never quite so overtly. The narrative of Metaphor ReFantazio centres on a magical election. Following the death of a king, a tournament is held to decide the next ruler of the kingdom. Yet Ukrainia is a world of disparate peoples, cat people, horned people, elvish people, and the like, with a mix of opposing ideologies. Can this kingdom truly be united? What responsibility does the king's power bring? And while anyone can compete in the tournament, from a lowly common man to a formidable high priest, is the likelihood of winning really equitable?
Wonders never cease. A fairy and an elden child. Are you new to our fair city?
Enter the game's bright-eyed, blue-haired protagonist, a young man striving for equality. He's an elder, a race at the bottom of the ladder, perpetually hated and openly discriminated against by the rest of society. His mission, by becoming king, is to end prejudice. A tall order, perhaps, but in this game, tolerance is, literally, one of 6 kingly virtues to develop alongside wisdom, courage, and more. Between the protagonist and his companions, diversity is celebrated despite the persistence of common cruelty, which results in some astute observations relevant to our own world.
Well, that was unnecessarily ominous.
Importantly, the protagonist's inspiration is a fantasy novel he carries with him to read between key plot points. It tells a tale of a modern world without magic or discrimination, where all people live equally, a world in direct contrast to both Ukrainia and our own. Is it the world of the game or the book within the game that's the true metaphor? Is a fantasy world just an ideal to strive for, or is it truly attainable?
All right.
The shift to a fantasy setting means Atlus leans on stereotypes and conventions established way back in the 90s, be that character tropes, the setting, or systems. Of course, it includes magical turn-based battles, cooking and fishing, alongside a coliseum for monster fighting, hunt requests, mysterious outcasts, proud knights and tribal people, predictable story beats, and a Sephiroth-esque villain. Thankfully, much of this is presented with a healthy dose of weirdness and eccentricity. Sure, it's typical to explore these sorts of worlds in an airship, but what about a gauntlet runner fueled by steampunk mechanics and giant legs to sprint across this colourful land?
They head to a cave said to consume all who enter. Does the dark, narrow path lead only to the innards of a monstrous insect? Perhaps.
What elevates Metaphor ReFantazio beyond these stereotypes is the expertise of Atlus, both mechanically and creatively. Gameplay is a series of interlocking systems with social elements and battles in symbiosis. Deepening relationships with certain characters leads to new archetypes to be used in battle, which leads to new magic abilities and synced up synthesis moves to exploit weaknesses. Players can earn currencies from battles used to improve equipment or unlock more archetypes to learn. And as the game opens up, there are more methods to boost your kingly attributes and aid your companions to deepen relationships. And so the cycle continues. Every element of the game has a purpose, doled out slowly. You're always progressing, always achieving something.
Amazing!
Battles themselves are a sublime example of turn-based combat. As with Atlus's Persona and Shin Megami Tensei games, characters can exploit the elemental weaknesses of enemies to gain advantage in a swift and extravagant display. But here they're boosted by archetypes, the personification of their inner heroism. In practice, archetypes are a class or job system, allowing characters to switch between wizards, healers, warriors, and the like, as well as more unique types. Any character can take any archetype, though some are more suited than others, and through deepening relationships, archetypes can evolve into new forms. Over time, characters can be tweaked further by inheriting the skills of one archetype into another, leading to a vast amount of customization. Perhaps a wizard gains healing power, or a warrior can cast spells. It's all expertly thought out and detailed.
The next one will fall just as easy.
A further wrinkle are synthesis skills, where characters combine their archetype powers into fierce new abilities. Think Chrono Trigger's combined techniques. Typically, opposing types could combine for a magical strike, for instance, or multiple mage types could increase the potency of spells. It pays to experiment and diversify the party, while bosses and special hunts provide enough challenge to test your knowledge of combat's multiple layers. Additionally, there's action combat, where weaker enemies can be defeated in real time without the need for lengthier turn-based battles. The protagonist's archetype determines his singular attack, and he can dodge too. It's not exactly Devil May Cry, but it maintains a consistently high tempo and ensures grinding is a breeze without interrupting exploration. All of these systems are presented with Atlus's typical stylish flair and effortless cool. Characters saunter away nonchalantly after disposing of some giant creature like it's nothing. Fans have come to expect bold menu design and memorable music from the developer, and they are here in abundance. Archetypes are chosen from a Vitruvian man, for instance, while the varied classical score features playful orchestration ranging from operatic to gentle melancholy. In particular, its choral battle theme is exceptionally dramatic.
Let's try this.
I live to see another. I shall vanquish evil.
Then Atlus brings trademark darkness to shock us and humanise its plot, with the twisted, Dali-esque surreal designs of its big monsters, abominations ironically known as humans, as well as its narrative that draws on kidnapping, child abuse, and a corrupt church using faith as a political weapon to control the population and discriminate against those in need. Through this, it's the developer's view of religion that is perhaps the most damning of all.
I shall show you what true...
Uchronia, then, is a world enveloped in anxiety and political unrest, yet there's still room for levity and humour. Its vibrant anime style features varied character designs with long hair, bright colours, and psychedelic patterns forming a 70s vibe that only adds to the nostalgia. And it's frequently funny, whether through eccentric characters or simply the childish disgust at being shat out the back end of a giant sandworm. Beyond the politics and nightmarish creatures, there's an old-fashioned, grand sense of adventure to Metaphor ReFantazio. Not every area is explorable, and its artful map is, let's say, a menu that's metaphorical for the world. Despite this, it feels far more expansive than the Persona games, each mostly locked to a single city, and it allows Atlus to flex its creativity. One minute the party is interrupted by a rival candidate lusting for battle, the next they enjoy a moment of peace to ponder the beauty of a magnificent tree, wistful clarinet lingering in the background.
Now, I think, what if the army... Well, Luis, What if he's the one who abandoned us?
Like Persona, the game utilises a calendar structure where each quest takes a certain number of days to complete, so you'll need to manage your time between missions and social activities accordingly. However, this does mean the story can lack urgency as you cycle through days awaiting the next story beat. The same can be said for side quests, which can sometimes seem frivolous by comparison. There's always plenty to do to occupy time though, and even if side activities undermine the core drama with tonal shifts, they enhance the characterization of each charming companion.
Mark my words, war will turn your arrogance to piss.
That structure leads to long-windedness too, though that will hardly be a surprise to Persona fans. Dungeons can take hours to complete, and while they're all handcrafted rather than procedurally generated and mostly feature unique environments and traps, their labyrinthine design can get quite repetitive. What's more, Atlus loves to over-explain. One moment, for instance, involved the game's fast travel system. While it was obvious to us what was happening, in-game the characters took far too long to understand this new ability. A little more editing really wouldn't have gone amiss here. At times, this celebration of the genre can feel self-indulgent. There are minor issues, though, that persist across Atlus's games. Perhaps Metaphor ReFantazio's most unique flaw is underutilising its election concept. The plot itself is ultimately linear, so while we managed our own time with companions, we were rarely forced to make a major decision. Despite the game's diverse races and warring ideals, we were never given a choice of companion or faction to side with as part of a branching narrative. Instead, the protagonist's politics are predetermined, all in service of a singular story without players needing to engage with the game on a political level themselves. As such, the election at the core of the game is essentially a pretense to offer a compelling fantasy story and lacks a little political bite. It's hardly subtle with its broad anti-religious sentiment and push for equality, while the idea of corrupt authority isn't new for Atlus. And on a smaller level, the shallow competing ideologies of cartoonish election candidates often boils down to eat the rich, lower taxes, everyone should be pretty.
Hack and slash! Tougher than I thought!
Despite the game's core conceit, Atlus isn't really making a political point beyond its big themes, and instead leans back on the stereotypical ideals of hope in a world of cruelty. Yet here, even that feels sincere rather than contrived. It's all part of that reframing of stereotypes, and its story, linear though it is gripping. Taken as a straightforward fantasy RPG, Metaphor ReFantazio is hard to beat, as Atlus expertly merges nostalgia and modernity.
Let my power support you.
If its lofty thematic goals of ending prejudice are too idealistic, perhaps that's actually the sort of positivity and hope that we need right now. Maybe, above all, the true purpose of fantasy is to provide comfort as we reflect on our own world. If that's the case, then Atlus's game is essential.
Vida's power.